Welcome to the Don't Die Rusty podcast. I'm Rick Hanson, and we will be talking about living, not dying. We're all in this adventure together, and we will be interviewing people who inspire us to live our best lives. People with various backgrounds who will walk us down the trails they took to not die rusty. Adventure in life are many things to many people. It could be a sprint or an endurance race, but with each adventure, we become a better version of us. We hope you keep chasing those dreams, being the best you, and of course, don't die rusty. Well, hello, Don't Die Rusty Nation. I've been pretty serious the last couple of episodes, and this will probably be a little serious too, but I am lucky to have Mike Gerst from PrepEm Wild. I'll let him explain what PrepEm Wild is. It's about being prepared in the wilderness if an accident or something happened, and he has first aid kits out and other things, and it'll be a great conversation because I have a lot of questions for him. And I'll let Mike, if you want to tell a little bit about PrepEm Wild, how people can get a hold of you in the beginning, so we don't wait till the end, and all that good stuff, and then we'll get into the conversation.
All right. Thanks, Rick. No, it's pleasure's all mine being here, and I appreciate the invite, giving us the opportunity to kind of get out there. And I always welcome having great conversation, and I love questions because I think at the heart of every good doctor is one that wants to educate and one that wants to help community. So I've been an ER doc now for 20 years. So graduated med school in 2005. So it's hard to believe I'm going into my 21st year. You kind of have to pinch yourself and wonder, man, where has the time gone? Because I still feel like, young, fresh out of school and, full of everything. But I've been practicing for the last 20 years. And I just want to preface the conversation with anything we discuss, opinions of my own and not that of any employer or, past, present, or future. And, we have to declare that. But PrepEm Wild was really born out of what I consider necessity within the outdoor community. So I grew up, I'd say lower middle class, and spent a lot of time in the outdoors. So, two brothers, my parents had three boys, and you stocked the freezer by being out in the woods and, squirrels, rabbits, deer, frogs, no matter what you could catch, that's what we put in our freezer. So I've always been part of the outdoors, and I consider kind of divine intervention ended up on a pathway to medical school. So I had no intention of going to college whatsoever out of high school. And I just happened to be really good at playing football. And my dad sat me down and said, no one in our family has had the opportunity to go to college. Why wouldn't you take this opportunity and you get to go and, play a game that you love? So, that's how I got into school. And then my second year in college, I sustained a significant traumatic brain injury, and actually had bleeding in my brain. And that was it. You're not going to find any doctor to clear you to play ball again. So I found myself sophomore year of college where I felt that I was, peaking, really, really had opportunity. And one day it was over. So I had to really, kind of collect myself and think, what am I going to do with my life? And, spent a week in the hospital with that injury and, around, follow-up visits and being around medicine a lot. I just kind of developed a passion. And I'd say it was more related to the fact that the physician that took care of us as football players, I didn't think was doing his job. And I remember laying in the hospital bed saying, if this guy can be a doctor, I have zero doubt that I can be. And it almost, it became a kind of a passive aggressive approach to proving somebody wrong, I guess, and saying, I can do this too. And, I didn't have anybody in my family to help mentor me or put me on the pathway to doing it. So just nose down and got it done. Now we fast forward 20 years into emergency medicine, and, in emergency medicine, you're on the receiving end of a lot of bad things. And, I've worked everything from very rural, what we call critical access hospitals, to level 1 trauma centers. And you see a lot, and where I'm from, so just kind of refocus this. I'm from Central PA. So Where I work, it's a very, it's a rural area. So I work in a city, but 10 minutes outside the city, it's rural. So you see a mix of, some of the gunshots, some of the stabbings. Majority of what we see, though, are those outdoor accidents. So whether it's on the farm, whether people are out in the field, out in the woods, that's how they tend to hurt themselves. And just realized, particularly, I'd say over the last 5 years, and I'd say everything, and I hate saying the C word, COVID, because I'm so over it and tired of talking about it. But, I'd say since then, there's been so much, misinformation, and people are confused and they don't understand what's right, what's wrong. We have a lot of people that have taken to social media, declaring themselves experts, and, whether it's through diet, exercise, giving medical advice on social media. There's just a tremendous amount of misinformation. So, through connections that you probably know too, who I've helped over the years, they just really pushed me in saying like, hey, you're always on speed dial for us. Any question we have, you're always available. And I've always done it, just because it's the right thing to do for people. And particularly for friends and family, I'm always available for someone. And they're like, why don't you just take a more proactive approach to it? And as soon as they said proactive approach, I'm like, man, if I don't, then I'm a hypocrite, because that's what I soapbox on all the time, is being more proactive than reactive. So, the being proactive is going to put us in the best position possible for a good outcome. So you don't wind up in an ER with me standing over you, giving you really bad news, or worse, me sitting in a room with your family giving them the worst news. So that's how PrepEm started. So, and it's really brand new, Rick. I mean, we literally just started our website in the past month here. So been doing the work in helping people for a few years, but really kicked off a website in the past month. So it's, www.prepemwild.com, in which, we put up blogs on there to help with some of the common things that we may encounter in the outdoors. Real quick, real short. We're not writing novels. These are not medical textbooks. That's really just try to bring it down to a level in which anybody can understand. And then we took it a step further and really started looking at what essential equipment do people need. So we literally just released our first med kit 2 weeks ago, in breaking those down too. So I don't know about you, but I have bought a lot of med kits over the years. I've spent thousands of dollars on med kits only to get them in the mail, and take half of the contents and throw it away. And just consider it a tremendous waste. So looking at the contents of a med kit and what we use on a daily basis, and what, I have been using for years, when I pack to go on a hunt out west up to Newfoundland, where in my backyard here, what I always have on me in case something happens. And that's kind of how that evolved.
Well, this is interesting, because this is why it's funny, because I started following you, and then we started, you said something on my posts a couple times, and then I thought, I want to have you on. And I was thinking this would be the perfect thing, because Don't Die Rusty is about wearing out, not rusting out. And but it also says don't die. And because I want people to be active, not just physically, but also mentally. But I'm out in the woods all the time, and I encourage other people to be out in the woods, because it helps. We all know it helps the body and soul. It helps us become a better person. That's what I think. But I was thinking, I have med kits, I have my emergency kits, and I've taken a couple. I've taken like one class on emergency med, and then it wasn't. I don't remember stuff like I should, because you don't do it all the time, and I just don't remember it. And I thought, but I really love your posts. I love how you're quick, like you were talking earlier in your blogs. You're quick and concise, and you tell people what's going on and how to help themselves and stuff. And then I started, and then actually I work at a building supply center, and last week we had a guy. He was cutting some. A driver came in from one of our vendors, and he cut himself, and he looked like I mean, I didn't know about it till they got it fixed, but he bled like a stuck pig. I mean, it was blood it was like somebody shot. And then I knew you and I were going to be doing this episode, and I'm thinking, I don't know stuff. I really don't know things, and I think you need to learn what is the basics, but I don't know what the basics are. I told you earlier before we started recording, I was at Total Archery Challenge in Big Sky 2 years ago now, I think it was. And a lady, I think she either broke or dislocated her ankle and I happened to be riding around with Frank, and we went up there and helped him. But the lucky part was right behind them was paramedics from Jackson Hole and Idaho. So, I mean, we were there and just stepped away because they know what they're doing. And and I learned from watching, and I wonder if I could do this stuff because like I said, I don't remember if her ankle was broke or dislocated, but them taking the time and knowing what they're doing, and I'm going, I'm dumb. I need to learn more of this stuff just in case I was out hunting or hiking and somebody else got hurt. I need to learn how to do stuff. And that's why I wanted you on.
Yeah. So I'll say this, Rick, you're not dumb, right? It's nobody's dumb. Everybody, possesses the capacity to understand and learn these things. It's just taking the proactive approach to doing it. Now in that situation you had there, you're fortunate because you have trained professionals there right behind you. Now picture yourself somewhere they're not around, and so what do you do in that situation? And there's some things that we can do that are the basics, and there's some things that we encounter routinely in the outdoors that we should understand. The number one reason for trauma deaths is hemorrhage, right? So, I mean, at the very basic, everybody should understand hemorrhage, have a basic understanding of anatomy, and what you may be encountering depending on where a wound is, a big laceration, God forbid a gunshot wound. I mean, I've been on the receiving end of those. People at hunting camps, I've taken care of. I can't even tell you how many over the last 20 years of camp accidents. Somebody thinks the gun's unloaded, somebody slips on the ice. I mean, I've seen it all. I mean, I've seen really upset property owners that have just shot other people because they felt that they were on their property. And if you're part of that party, or you're the only one, you're hunting solo, understanding this and taking a proactive approach to it, is going to prevent you from dying. So, and that's what this is really about. So, I've invested, going on 20 years of my life, more than that, I mean, with school and training, but, more than 20 years of my life in, helping other people. And it's what I consider a reactive approach. It's, we're there to take care of that. That's what we're experts in, but how much more can be done before you get to me? That's the point of this. That's the whole point of PrepEm. And I just have to say, I love your posts and your page. I check them every morning because it really peps me up, and it gives me an outlook on the day because of your positivity and, just your approach every morning. I absolutely love it. So that's how you and I connected, because I started following you and I connected because I saw you had Dana Monroe on, and I know Dana.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, what's this Don't Die Rusty? That sounds interesting. Want to dive into this a little bit more and listen to your episode with Dana. And I'm like, yeah, this dude's pretty cool. I love his outlook. I love what he's doing. So yeah, I started sending some positive comments back because you exude positivity, and we need more of that. And you're giving great advice too. So that's very much appreciated in the community.
Well, thank you. I truly appreciate that because I try every day, to find the positive something in the day. So thank you. And
And sometimes
I'm
that's
look.
hard to do, Rick. People struggle to do that. They do. I'm one of them. It's like I can have a really, really bad day and look at it and say, man, everything just sucks right now. So,
And I
seeing
also
somebody like you on there puts things in perspective.
because I also want to say I do have bad days, but you try to. I feel that if you can try to here's what I do every morning. It's funny because we talked this morning, but every morning I get up at 4:55. I'm usually out the door by 5:10, and I'm walking 3 miles. And I'm thinking about what I want to say, the post, this and that. And I'm just thinking about life. And I think that's when you start out your day. And it's not. I have had this discussion with one of my friends, and he says you have great self-discipline, and I said I think self-discipline is when you don't want to do it, and I do want to do it. I want to get up and go out every morning and see what's going on. So
Yeah.
I just, but like I said, I love this collaboration here at the moment. You know what I mean? It's like you're saving
I
lives,
do.
helping save lives, and maybe I'm pepping them up so they can go do something else. So it's good. But I see that
You're doing
MKC,
the
and I
same, my friend.
well, good. I see that MKC behind you, and I know you've done a couple episodes or a few episodes with Josh Smith. And I want to tell you,
Mm-hmm.
2 years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, I had my speed goat. I shot a muley buck, and here's where I want to go mostly with this stuff because I hunt 90% by myself. Okay. And I shot a
Okay.
muley buck, and I'm skinning it out. And this is 8 o'clock. By the time I'm skinning it out, getting to it, got skinning it out. It's 8 o'clock at night, and I'm tired. It's been a long day, and I stabbed myself in the leg, and I actually showed him that I still have a nice little scar here from the speed goat, and I felt the blood trickling
Yep.
down my leg, and I looked at it, and I saw I never got it stitched up or anything because I didn't think it needs stitches, but it was bleeding like you got stuck in the leg. But my question is,
Okay.
like, when do you know? Like, I was in Montana, and I know you can't see my finger here, but I was in Montana, so I'm going to sound like I do stupid stuff sometimes, but I drew back on a bull. My arrow came off the rest, and I went to flick up my,
Mm-hmm.
and I kind of jerked, and the broadhead went over my finger, and I didn't get the elk at that moment, but I got one that evening. But I went back, and I didn't hear you talk about this in any of the other episodes, but I went back to my camp, and I had fletching glue there. And, I mean, it's bleeding. It was open. I cut it
Yeah.
up, put fletching glue on it, and went back to hunting. Is that good or bad?
No. So the most important thing. So let's start with the leg injury you were talking about, and when do you know, and when is it significant? The leg wound, and when do you know a leg wound is significant enough to do anything about? And this goes really to kind of stop the bleed education, and things that we look at. Is it pumping? Is it pumping? Is it spraying? Is it pooling? Is it pulsatile type bleeding? Because then you've hit an artery, and like I said earlier, understanding the anatomy of your body helps you determine could this be something significant. Now if you catch a knife into your groin and you have blood spraying out, you've hit your femoral artery, and that could be something that could take your life within minutes, if it's a significant enough puncture. So anatomy is the number one thing, and you don't have to understand the anatomy to the point that we do, where we, when we go through school, we dissect human bodies down to bones. But to have a basic understanding, most importantly, like I said, with blood vessels, because hemorrhage being the number one preventable cause of death and trauma. So that's something that you must know, especially if we're out working with knives. your finger. You ask, did I do the right thing or not? And my answer to that is, were you able to remain in camp? And if you're able to remain in camp and finish out your hunt, then I consider that a win, and you did the right thing. With fingers, the thing that we always have to worry about is if we get into a tendon. So, and that's really easy to check because you're just going to do some, the most basic movements of your hand and fingers. You're going to want to extend your fingers all the way. You're going to want to make a fist all the way. And when I say make a fist, it's just like this. And you want to make sure that your fingernails get tucked under. That tells us right away that none of the tendons are severed, because if you have a severed tendon, and that's something a little more time sensitive, that's going to require surgery. So you don't want to remain in camp for days or a week after. You can get infections within that tendon sheath that we call tenosynovitis, and that could ultimately result in amputation. So you don't want to end up there. But you bring up one of the most common things that we encounter in the outdoors, and that's, cuts, scrapes, lacerations. I'm always cutting myself. I'm quick trying to gut a deer, trying to teach my kids, and, not looking, not paying attention, doing more educating for them. And before you know it, I take a MKC blade right across my finger, and it happens to the best of us. But the basic wound management is important. The first thing you want to do is always irrigate the heck out of it. Irrigation you want to use as clean a water as you can. You don't want to be dipping your hand in a creek. Certainly don't want to be dipping your hand in, a still body of water like ponds or lakes or anything like that, because you could just be introducing, really harmful bacteria. You want to really irrigate it, and you want to close that up the best you can. And sometimes closing it up is honestly just reapproximating the edges of that wound, lining it up right, and wrapping it good, right? Getting a basic gauze over that and a tape, and just tape that on and keep that closed, keep it protected. And I tell people, like, once you irrigate it well and you've bandaged it well, you can leave that be for the next 2 to 3 days, unless you start noticing redness above or below the bandage, or you start experiencing fevers. But you don't want to keep opening it up and checking it when you're in the outdoors, because you're just going to reintroduce bacteria. And then it's just basic wound management from that point forward. You want to, wound dressings, make sure that you're keeping it, clean, dry, and keeping that dressing intact.
Well, that's good to know. I mean, my finger didn't fall off, so I was doing pretty good.
I'd say you did the right thing, Rick.
Well, good.
You stayed in camp and your finger didn't fall off, so you knew exactly what you were doing.
Yep, and then I shot a bull that afternoon, so everything worked out well. So what do you recommend? Like I said, I'm saying 90% by myself.
Yeah.
And what should a person by themselves learn? You know what I mean? That learn to do for themselves if they got hurt or something like that. Because if you have nobody else there to help you, what would you say in your kit, in your knowledge of what to do? Because you could either be cut, and learn how to fix yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I keep coming back to the hemorrhage part of this, right? And hemorrhage being the preventable, cause of trauma death. Understanding hemorrhage control is number one. That's the one thing in the outdoors that everyone should have a very basic understanding: how to plug a hole, how to apply a tourniquet, so they can get themselves out of there. If you don't understand the basics in wound care, in broader hemorrhage control, then you're putting yourself at great risk. And understanding the link between hemorrhage and hypothermia and how that puts you at great risk too. So, we talk about trauma and we talk about hemorrhage. Hypothermia is our worst enemy. If we're letting ourselves get cold out there and we don't have means of starting a fire, getting ourselves warm again, then you're putting yourself at extreme risk, of dying before you're able to get out or somebody's able to get to you. So, number one, I'm always going to say hemorrhage control. Understand tourniquets, and that's what our kits come with, the tourniquet. I don't consider any kit an essential kit unless it has a tourniquet and also a clotting gauze. So ours has wound clot in it, for these bigger wounds that we can incur. You have to imagine, like you're saying, you're out at tack, we're out archery hunting. We have an arrow out of the quiver and we slip, fall, we can drive that right through our thigh. We can end up within our arm, our shoulder. I've seen them everywhere. I mean, I've seen people impaled in the neck with arrows. So understanding that and how to, manage that in the moment, and just understand with arrows and with any foreign body, if you're impaled with one, do not take it out, leave it in. And the reason for that is you kind of have to envision, that foreign body, say it's through your upper arm, and you go ripping that out, like you see, in the old Westerns, that they just pull an arrow out. That arrow may be resting up against that artery and putting pressure on that artery so you're not bleeding out. It's okay to, cut it down, but don't take the whole thing out. So you never want to remove foreign bodies, because that may be what's keeping you alive. So, I've seen, somebody stabbed and they pull the knife out and then they just gush, right?
Yep.
We typically, we'll remove those foreign bodies, whether, arrow, knife. Long time ago, had a kid with a javelin through his neck. You want to leave those things intact. I've had guys working on construction sites that have slipped, fall, put rebar through their pelvis or through their thighs. That's an important piece to remember. If you're impaled with something, you leave it be, and let us take care of it. You're going to want to get yourself out of there, but hemorrhage control, wound control is number one. Understanding, the big threes in the outdoors, everybody should be familiar with those, right? 3 minutes without oxygen, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food, 3 hours without shelter, understanding how to, makeshift a shelter if you are injured and you're incapacitated, to at least get yourself out of the elements. That's really important as well. And our kits also come with emergency blankets. So if you find yourself in one of those positions where you're bleeding, that, and they're funny. Everybody looks at those things like they're a joke, but they're like these, Mylar things that, NASA uses and stuff to retain body heat, and that's really important. And then you really have to get creative to keep yourself warm. If you dislocated your ankle or you dislocated your knee, you're really not going to be humping it out of there. You're going to be calling for help, for somebody to come get you. And keeping warm is going to be essential. So, understanding that extremity care too, how to properly splint. Splints are not difficult. It's, and our kits actually have splint material, what we call SAM splint. So it's an aluminum moldable material. So, if you find yourself with a bad ankle injury and you need to splint that up, so if you are able to at least walk on it, you just need stability. So you're not destroying more of the, the nerves and the vessels around your ankle. You can splint that up and try to make it out of there. Understanding how to fashion a splint really easy, and what's a stirrup splint, and what's a volar splint, and a thumb spica splint, all those things. And that's all stuff that, as PrepEm matures and as we get more into venues and bigger events, which we have one planned here over the winter, where we get to do hands-on stuff with people in the community. And that's really exciting to me because I love teaching. I love to take somebody with a desire and, wanting to gain more knowledge and, applying that and letting them get some of that from me. So, that goes back to that proactivity that we need within the community, and recognizing that, we're all perfectly capable. I don't know one person in the outdoor community that isn't capable of anything. We're very resourceful. We're not quick to give up on anything. So as much time as we spend prepping for a hunt, we should spend an equal or if not greater amount of time prepping to care for ourselves or those that we're going out with. So, my buddies and my family love it when I'm on hunts with them. because they feel secure and they feel safe, right? but but we're in the truck. So we drive from PA to Newfoundland every year to go moose hunting, and I had to miss it this year. The guys just got back yesterday, and my brother killed the biggest bull moose that he's killed since 2014 up there. But last year when we're in the truck, and it's a long drive up and back, it takes 3 days to get to camp, driving, crossing on a ferry, with your truck and your hunting trailer and all that good stuff. Yeah. But it's a great adventure. But as we're driving, it's, talking about that. And I always have all the materials with me, and I have the stuff in a bag and ready to go. And they said, man, it's really good that you're around. We know that we're going to make it out, but what happens if you get hurt? And that was, but Rick, that was another part where I'm like, oh, well, I'm not doing a good enough job myself in preparing, my core group of friends and family that are along with me. So how do I get them up to speed? And, that was just one more thing that added to this, and in how and why we started PrepEm. And, so everybody can go out and be more of an asset. You'll see in our posts a lot, be an asset, not a liability. If you're not willing to put the time in, you're not willing to put training in, then all you are is a liability to not only yourself, but everybody that you're with. So if you and I are hunting together, and, you go down or I go down, and, you don't possess the means or the knowledge in helping me, then you're just as much of a liability as I am injured. Right.
And that's exactly what I was thinking today is I was thinking about what you were saying there, be the asset. And I was thinking the reason I've been in very few situations to help anybody out, but I was thinking I want to gain more knowledge to be an asset. So if there's people that are questioning what to do or whatever else, I want to have the PrepEm bag in my hand, and I want to be able to go say, this is what we need to do until we get help. And you've encouraged me to do this. It's interesting because I want to tell you a funny story. This is where I've been. Is the night before I got married to my wife, her son is a paramedic.
Okay.
And it's dark, and we were in a hotel room, and it's dark, and she had to get up to go to the bathroom, and there was a 1 foot false wall. Just, right there. She ran right into the wall. Oh. And she started bleeding in the face. I said, do we need to call your son? Instead of saying that, you know what I mean? Instead of saying,
let me help you.
Yes. Instead of saying, do we need to call Connor, is what I said. And it was funny because then luckily makeup helped the situation out, and she didn't look like I beat the hell out of her the night before our wedding. But I think about that stuff, and I say, Rick, you got to start learning how to be prepared to help somebody in a situation. That's a funny situation. It wasn't bad, but there was a sharp corner, which she just got a little gash, but
yeah.
But those kind of things, like we were talking earlier, the cut on my leg, I have to tell you, I was dumb one time, and I was changing batteries with my knife in my rangefinder, went right across my thumb. And when you talk about tendons,
yeah,
and I drove myself down to the doctor, ER, and I said, I need to get this stitched up because I'm going into Montana in the morning. He said, nope, you're not going in the morning because I cut 90. He estimated 97% of my thumb tendon.
Of your tendon, yeah.
Yeah. And
you're cooked.
And then he said, he had it open that next morning when he was sewing it up. And he said, see that white thing in there? You cut that again, it ain't going to be good the second time. So don't do it. And then you aren't going to believe this. But so, and it was like I call it vet wrap around my thumb then. The next day I went and shot the biggest mule deer buck I've ever shot in Montana and did everything one-handed.
I love that.
So
I love that.
but the stupid things you do, and I should have got a screwdriver. But those are the things in the woods that you don't think about. Like, I should have got a screwdriver to change my rangefinder batteries, but I didn't. I had a knife in my hand. I thought, well, I got to sharpen them anyway, and they were sharp enough to cut my thumb.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, kind of thing. And so when we get into injuries like that kind of stuff, or here's the other deal is, this is something I haven't seen, but those two young guys that got electrocuted, got the lightning in Colorado.
I saw that.
What if one lived?
Right.
I mean, what happens if it was close enough to shock you, but not close enough to kill you? What do you do in those situations?
Yeah, that's a really tough one. Electrocutions of that magnitude are really difficult. Not to say that people don't survive. I mean, I've believe it or not, I've cared for those patients as well. I've cared for dozens of people that have been hit by lightning. And usually what ends up happening if you take a direct hit, yeah, you're fried. Sometimes you can take more of an indirect hit and you can go into a bad arrhythmia of your heart, and really without advanced equipment like an AED or the paddles and defibrillator that we have in the hospital, you can perform CPR and hope for the best, call for help and hope it gets there quick. But I've taken care of those people, and I've had good outcomes, and I've had not so good outcomes with them, and it really depends on how much of a direct hit that is. That one there, Rick, sounded like they were both together. That was just direct hit. One gets hit and the other one doesn't. I mean, you're going to administer CPR as much as you can. Really hope for the best, and hoping, praying. And it'd be like like winning the Powerball that during CPR that you'd be able to reset that that conductivity of the heart and get them back into a good rhythm again. But there's some things that we're going to encounter in the outdoors that no matter how much you try and how much you're trained, I've been doing this for 20 years, like I said, and there's some things that I could encounter in the outdoors that no matter what I do, you just don't have the advanced equipment. I can't carry a mobile emergency department on my back and have all the defibrillators and all that stuff with me, every hunt that we go on. But there's going to be some things that you encounter that you're just going to have to know that you did the best you could. And it's way easier, not that it's ever easy to accept loss, but what I'm trying to say. It's easier to walk away from that knowing that you tried and you were confident in your skills and it still didn't work out versus I just stood there and I didn't know what to do and I panicked and I just had to watch them die. That's something that's really hard to live with. So, but going back to one of the comments that you made, you said, I don't ever think this stuff's going to happen to me. Right. And that is the number one reason statistically why people don't carry necessary equipment. You look at, I've been hunting since I've been 6 years old, and I've never had, a major event happen to myself. I've had events happen with other people while I'm out, but, everybody thinks that it's not going to happen to me because I've been in the woods for the last 30 years, 40 years, and not just the woods, not just hunting, but, trail running and mountain biking and, just hiking. Those types of things, people just have this mindset of, well, I've been doing it for this long and nothing's ever happened. So why is it going to happen now? But certainly it can. And you spend enough time doing those activities and something will happen. It's statistics. I mean, you draw that out over years and you have more touch points in the outdoors doing whatever you love. And it's just risk every time you go out. So that's why preparation, and I love hearing from people like you that you want to know more and you want to train more and become that asset, because that's what the whole community needs. And we hope that spreads like wildfire, in that you get one person interested and with their hunting party and their family, their friends, or, those people they go out and, do marathons with, or they go out and trail ride with, or, they all get on their motorcycles and ride for a weekend, that, that kind of spreads, and everybody takes that interest in feeling like, wow, you know what, I really don't know much. And, if one of these situations occur, I want to be there to help, the people that you're with. So that's what we're all about.
Well, that's a definite for me, because I'm trail running. I'm hiking a lot. I wouldn't say trail running, but I'm friends with really good trail runners, and I'm up in the, like I said, I'm up in the woods. You never know what you might encounter. I've encountered people in different situations. Like I had a person that had one kidney and he was trying to get hydrated, and how, stay hydrated, was climbing, but it was a hot day. And
hydration right there. The hydration and what people think is hydration. That's one of the things that drives me insane, but not to cut you off, but you bring up hydration, and that's one thing that frustrates me so much, and what people feel is good, adequate hydration. And it's, coffee, teas, certainly alcohol is never hydrating. And for whatever reason, Gatorade has got their foot in the door of, that's the ultimate, hydration agent for everybody. And it's really not. If you're drinking straight Gatorade, it's loaded with sugar, and, you're actually going to dehydrate yourself more. I've had people take that quite literal in, when they have a GI bug, and we're told every time you move your bowels, every time you go to the bathroom, slam a bottle of Gatorade, and they took that literal and put themselves into kidney failure doing that, because they're taking that sugar and your body wants to process that sugar out, and you're actually peeing out more than what you're taking in. And slowly but surely, you're just getting more and more dehydrated and putting yourself at risk. So, Gatorade's not a great thing. There's some great products out there now, that's certainly more bioidentical to what our body is, right? More sodium. Sodium's not a bad thing in those situations. You certainly need sodium. I'm a huge fan of just basic pink Himalayan salt. I think the ultimate sports drink in the outdoors is, an 1/8 to 1/4 teaspoon of pink Himalayan salt, and, a little bit of flavoring. And I usually use just like half a lemon, just because you don't want to feel like you're drinking ocean water. Right. So you don't want to feel like you're just drinking nothing but ocean water. So I'll put half a squeeze of lemon in that. So pink Himalayan has, the essential minerals and vitamin stuff that we need in it, and along with the, vitamin C of lemon. So I feel that that's one of the best rehydration drinks that you can do. But there's some other, Protect has good products out there. Element has good products out there that I feel are really good. Mountain Ops, I'm a huge fan of Mountain Ops products too. But you want to make sure that you're looking at those labels and that you're not getting into a lot of sugar.
Well, what I do is I usually take one of them, one hydration, and drink that. And then I will drink water, like, in between, I don't just drink the hydration. But I did have this is a funny one. I was talking to my friend, and Ashley, before today, they just got back from a mountain goat hunt in Idaho, and we were talking about what if you're trying to clean a wound or something, and you only had hydration in your bottle,
right?
You know what I mean? You're thinking that I'm going to need all this hydration, but you don't. What would you do? Would you still clean it with hydration in there?
Depending. So I'll say this. I'll say depending on the wound, right? So if this is a wound that you have a clean knife, you weren't in the guts of an animal with it, and you cut yourself with a, fresh out of the sheath knife, I don't think there's a whole lot to do with that, and let it bleed, and as long as you're not gushing, you're not spraying blood everywhere, but let it bleed, because that's the body's kind of natural way of expelling stuff. So, you bleed, and anything that's, small microscopic debris is going to come out with the blood. You
Mm-hmm.
can wipe that clean with some sterile gauze, some fresh packed gauze, nothing that you're carrying around in your pocket or at the bottom of your kit that's out of the wrapper, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
you certainly try to wipe any debris out, but um, I, the problem with the hydration stuff, and especially if you've already been drinking from it, our mouths are loaded with bacteria. So it's kind of, you're taking what's in that bottle that you've been drinking from, you had your mouth to, that's now sat in that bottle for a day, 2 days, sometimes 3 days, depending on how quick you drink. And it
Yep.
just becomes, kind of this petri dish in there, especially as it warms up as, outside temperatures. So, I'd be cautious. I'd certainly be cautious with that. If you've not been drinking from the bottle all day and say it's a fresh hydration drink and, that's what you have, I would use it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd see no problem in using it.
Well, that's what we were just. I mean, I'd never thought of that because, like, I mean, like I said, I usually have two bottles, one without, one with.
Yeah.
Just,
So that's
just in.
the preparation style of what you should be thinking, right? So you should
Yep.
have without and with, because the without is what you're going to like. I always have, an uncapped bottle of water,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just for that. And that's if it's like I'm into the point of, I've been hiking and I feel, my heart rate's up and I've been sweating all day and I go from sweating to now I'm getting dry. That's where you've been sweating a little too much, right?
Yep.
You may be working more towards, that heat exhaustion, heat stroke realm where you go from pouring sweat to now your skin's dry and you need whatever water, that reserve bottle that I'll use for washing out wounds. Yeah, I'm going to use it because that's the more emergent need then. But I always have a bottle in my bag just for irrigation. 12 ounces? What's an extra 12 ounces to carry in your pack, really, to be honest with you?
Well, and that's my theory. Like, here's the deal. I carry, like I said, big. I have two 32-ounce bottles that I carry, and you're drinking out of one, so you're losing weight as you
Yeah.
move anyway.
Yeah.
So to me, fluid like water, it's a weight that's going to be gone. You're starting out with it, but it keeps on going unless you
Yeah.
can.
As you get
have
tired,
something.
the weight gets, as you're getting more tired, the weight's going away anyway, because you're hydrating with it. So
Exactly. So how do you? You talked about a tourniquets, and
yeah.
people need to learn how to know when to use a tourniquet and also how to use a tourniquet.
Yep.
And do you put it on too tight? How do you know when you have it too tight?
So there's no such thing as too tight. So I'll say that.
Oh,
So, and that's where the tourniquet failures that I'll see are because people are afraid they're putting it on too tight. The purpose of the tourniquet is to put it on tight enough to cut off the blood flow, right? So
yep.
now you want to make sure when, there's so many tourniquet brands out there, and what we have in our kit is a snake staff system tourniquet. And for multiple reasons, they're made in the USA. We're not going to put anything made outside of the US in our kits because, they're cheap and, they can end up failing more than likely. So,
Yep.
the snake staff system tourniquets as well, are pretty compact. Once you fold those up, that's something that you can literally put in your front pocket, in your back pocket. They have belt clips. You can put it right on your belt just as an EDC tourniquet. And there's no excuse. Some of the tourniquets that are made, I mean, you're looking at these things folded up, they're like this long. I mean, who's going to have that hanging out in their pocket? If they're out running,
Yep.
biking,
Yeah.
whatever. So that's why we chose this snake staff system. And I've used every tourniquet, out there. I have 100% confidence in them. So, when you put a tourniquet on, it's always best, especially if somebody has all their gear on, their clothes. And, what are the main indicators for, hey, I need to put a tourniquet on this person now? If they have clothes on and that their clothing is quickly soaked through, where, You know how you bleed and your clothes soak it up, but it still looks like it's dry and it's, but if that's glistening, if your clothing has a big spot of blood on it and that's glistening and it's just growing, you want to seriously consider throwing a tourniquet on immediately. Don't expose it first because you're wasting time. Get the tourniquet on high and tight. So the only thing I'll say, lower extremity and lower forearms, you want to go a few inches above that. What I always say is, take 3-4 finger breadths above the wound or where you think the wound is with the blood pattern, throw that tourniquet on. Then you can go and, use your shears. We have shears in our kit as well. And I recommend shears because they're blunt ended. The last thing you want to do if you're not familiar with working tourniquets is take out your MKC Speed Goat and rip up somebody's sleeve or pant leg and actually cut them the whole way up. And now you've got a major catastrophe on your hand, right? Because that can happen. That's right. That can happen, right? You go just running that up the inside of their leg, and now you just filleted their thigh. So you want to be. So that's why we throw shears in there. And again, it's not, these kits aren't just for hunting. I mean, these are for, I keep one in the console of all my vehicles. The number of vehicle accidents that I've just come across that you just need essential materials to help somebody on the side of the road. But that tourniquet, they're pooling blood. It's pumping, it's spraying. That's signs of an arterial bleed. The other thing that we say is color, right? So if you're noticing blood, like almost like this, like my string here on my hood, arterial, right? Sometimes it can get tricky though, depending, dehydration status, oxygen level, how sick if is a person sick, are they worn out? Sometimes you get darker colored arterial blood, and we sometimes get fooled with that in the ER as well. We can be putting a central line in somebody's groin or under their clavicle or in their neck, and you get a blood return that looks dark, and you're like, there's no way I'm in the artery. This is venous blood. Only to remove the needle, and it starts, it sprays you, in the face or head. And you're like, nope, we're arterial here. So it can fool you. So that's why we look at every one of those components, right? Color, pooling, squirting, spraying, pulsating blood. They're indicators for, a tourniquet. So, and familiarize yourself with the tourniquet. Just don't buy one, and one is none in the world of tourniquets. You should be carrying, 2 tourniquets, because they're, you can apply a tourniquet and just like, man, it's still not stopping. Get a second tourniquet on even higher. Okay. Once you have that tourniquet on, then it can, and you don't notice any more blood pooling or, pulsating, then you can get a better look at it. You take those shears and you expose the area, look at what you're really dealing with at that point. Now we can get into the world of tourniquet conversion in, packing a wound and applying pressure dressings and letting the tourniquet down to see if you have hemorrhage controlled, because, and that's dependent on how far away you are from definitive care or help. So if you're back in there and it's going to, it's a day, for rescue to get to you, if they can get to you at all, that's getting into more advanced techniques that we like to do hands-on training and discuss, because you want to avoid an amputation if you can. Once you start getting to that 8-hour mark, 6-8 hours, you start pushing to the point of that person's going to end up with an amputated extremity. So sometimes letting tourniquets down and, doing a good wound pack, getting a wound clot gauze in there, packing that with a compressed Z gauze that we call. I don't know if you've ever seen those, Rick.
I haven't.
Oh, they're I love compressed Z gauze. There's so much utility to it. It's a little brick of gauze like this thick, right? But as you start pulling that, it's like one of those magic shit where they pull the handkerchiefs and it just keeps coming and coming. It's like that stuff, and then you end up with a ball of gauze like this that you can use to just pack in a hole, and compress that area, that bleeder. So,
because that's it. I wanted to get to gauze because, like the packing, because I just saw the clotting gauze or the clotting in one of your posts. And how do we know? Because here's what's going to happen is I'm going to find out when you have a class or if you're going to be close by. and I'm going to learn from you. That's all there is going to be to this.
I would love it.
Because I would love just to come and learn and then do another episode, but I'd want to learn, but like, like the packing of the wound, how do we know, like, do you use a tourniquet, then you can check out the wound and pack that, or what do you do?
So that's the number one recommendation is, you tourniquet first and then check out the wound. If you're dealing with a true arterial bleeder, a main artery, you have minutes to react. You don't have the time to take shears and cut off the clothing and expose, get a good look at it. You want to get pressure on that immediately. So, first step is, you just get pressure on that. And, if it's the palm of your hand that you're just pushing as hard as you can while you get your materials out. And hey, that person that may be wounded can help and assist in that process as well and getting into your kit. I've seen some kits. This is the other thing that we did too. We wanted to make sure that it's easy access into the kit, so a very easy zipper. And we're actually right now finalizing the steps in a mass hemorrhage kit that what's contained within that kit is just use it up. Like, you don't have to stop. You don't have to think. You don't have to rifle through it. Just use the stuff, man, because you're going to save a life that way. And that one's just a rip tab. I mean, you're just going to, pull that tab and the zippers just fly open and, you just grab the stuff out of it. But, I've seen some kits that their zippers are so difficult to open. Now imagine you're wounded and you're here like trying to jack open a zipper and the person's just bleeding. Like, hey, what are you going to get to this now? And you're still fiddling with the zipper. So, you never second guess in an instance of when you notice those things. Bright red color, it's pulsating, squirting, spraying blood, and it's pooling quickly. Man, just jam the heel of your hand into that. Put as much pressure on it as you can. And it's uncomfortable for the patient or the person that you're with. Very uncomfortable. But it's best to deal with some discomfort rather than death any day, right? So Definitely. The discomfort, the uncomfortable feeling lets you know that you're just still alive. So when they stop screaming, that's when you really have to worry, Rick.
I believe that. Because because I just look at that stuff and I just go, I hope I never have to use that, but I want to know how to do it. And it's just funny how you grow older and you're invincible when you're 20, and then you start getting older and thinking, what if something happens? Like if you fall over a log and a limb was broke off and you stick it through your leg or whatever. But here's the one that's going to be pertinent to me because and you've been posting this. I think you posted it the last couple days or within the last couple days or so. But I've been elk hunting, helping my cousin elk hunt the last month. But this weekend, our rifle antelope opens up. Okay?
Yeah.
And I'm not a snake person. We have rattlesnakes.
Yeah, here we go. The snakes.
I have friends that say, come to Africa and we'll go hunting. And I said, you have snakes that go through this. I'm not a mamba or a cobra person, and I certainly do not like rattlesnakes. So
okay.
But and it's funny because I've been around them. I've never been bit, but I'm just saying in case you were, because I have had a higher vertical leap than probably Michael Jordan ever had
from a snake.
A snake. We were eating lunch one time we were deer hunting, but it was a warm day and we had the tailgate open on the pickup and, it was lunchtime and here came a rattlesnake, probably trying to get the shade underneath the vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't touch anything and was standing on the tailgate.
You just boom,
when that
right up.
I did.
Right up.
So I'm telling you, that's the only time I had a great vertical leap. I can tell you that right there. But 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 in then everything turns into a snake. You know, a stick turns into a
Yep.
snake when you're hunting. You might as well just stop. So
Yeah.
my question is, what happens if we're out here in South Dakota, in western South Dakota, and we accidentally get bit by a rattlesnake? What do we do?
Yeah. So that's a great time. Yeah, I just did cover this one here. Yeah, in the past week. You know, I have rattlesnakes all around, you know, central PA, I have rattlesnakes all around the house. If I could pan over, I'd show you all the rattlesnake hides that I have on top of my TV stand here and hanging on, you know, with my guns, because, you know, I encounter them quite a bit. And you know, they come down to our pool area to try to sun themselves on the concrete. And my wife, you know, was putting on the pool cover one night, the solar blanket, bend down to get it. And thankfully it was cold that evening and just drizzling. So this snake was, you know, pretty relaxed and, you know, wasn't aggressive. It wasn't hot at the time. She bends down and comes face to face with a rattlesnake, and it just started warning her. And all the encounters that I've had with rattlesnakes, you know, they're not aggressive, right? Every encounter that I've had with one, they're trying to get away from you. And unlike copperheads, you know, copperheads for us in PA, they are super aggressive snakes. And I had an encounter with one of those last summer. I actually reached down to pick it up because my wife hates snakes, and she sees like a black snake or a little garter snake, and she wants to get a shotgun and, you know, just unload on it because that's how much she hates them. But I bent down to pick this thing up and quickly recognized, you know, that, nope, this is that triangular, you know, pit viper head. And the thing started chasing me around the driveway.
Oh my gosh.
It did. So, you know, rattlesnake bites, and this is where there's so much misinformation. And rattlesnake bites are pretty simple to manage and care for. And this is not one of those things that we're going to teach you and you're going to be able to care for this and remain on your hunt. You get bit by a snake, you're out of there. I mean, you're calling for help. What a lot of people do, and this is through misinformation, and I actually just posted on this the other day and have received a ton of comments on it asking great questions, and I love that. You know, what about tourniquets? What about cutting it open? You know, I remember one time they sold this kit that was a little scalpel blade with a suction syringe on it to suck out the venom, right? Doesn't work. So we don't want to put tourniquets on. And the answer, and the reason why is, if we put a tourniquet on, you're now concentrating the venom in that area. You are going to end up with gangrene and amputation. And the gangrene part is that long-term down the road that's really difficult to manage and fix at that point, right? You end up getting septic from a gangrenous leg. Now you've got a systemic infection that you put yourself at risk for. So what you know, the answer to how we manage it is to get to an emergency department. Preferably, you want to know where the nearest trauma center is, because they're usually the ones that have what we call crofab, the antivenom, on stock. The more remote, rural emergency departments, because it's so expensive, a lot of them now, I don't know out your way if the rural emergency departments keep it on stock. Usually what ends up happening is you'll have the large center that keeps it on stock, or a centralized type pharmacy that keeps it. And if a smaller center needs it or has a snake bit patient, either the patient moves or the crofab moves to them, right? I've seen it happen both ways. I've seen the patient move to us. I've also seen us move the crofab, depending on how unstable the patient is. So your crofab is the answer. The antivenom is the answer. We don't need a tourniquet. You don't put ice on it. It's really where you bit is basic wound management. Irrigate, cover it, bandage it, do everything possible to keep your heart rate down. So we don't want to get bit. Realize that we're in a stressful moment, put a big chew in, smoke a cigarette or a cigar, down a beer or a few shots to take the pain away. It's going to get your heart rate up, and that's going to start circulating that venom even more, right? Yeah. So, you know, the tourniquet discussion is always one. Drinking alcohol to numb the pain is one. You don't really want to take NSAIDs like ibuprofen, Aleve. You know, they're blood thinners. Venom can be blood thinning as well, so we don't want to compound that. it's honestly one of these things that it's, grin, bear it, dress the wound and get to a center with the antivenom. And Crofab is an antivenom that covers all the North American pit vipers. So rattlesnakes, copperheads, cottonmouths, water moccasins, it covers those. So we've seen some, more exotic snake bites. We usually see that they're, for whatever reason, pet owners, or we have a zoo near us that has a full exotic display of snakes, and they're not, they haven't taken the glands or the fangs out, and you can see that happen. Now, the places that have those types of snakes, they cover the antivenom specific for that, right? So whether it's a king cobra or whatever. So
I'm with your wife on the shotgun thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't, I am totally, and then this is, I remember we have a place in Rapid City, South Dakota, it's called Reptile Gardens, and I went there as a young person, but this person I don't need to go there ever again.
No.
Never. I'm just not a snake person at all.
Her trusted method of getting rid of them, especially when she sees them in the driveway, is to run over them at least a dozen times and then do a burnout on them with her truck. And then she knows that she's safe and they're not going to climb up the mountain to our home. So I've come home already and I'm driving, we have a really steep driveway, and on the side of a mountain, we have about 200 acres here. And I've come up the driveway at the end of the day and just see bits and pieces of snake laying all over the driveway. And I'll pull in and she's just like, "Did you see that big snake that I saw? I saw the pieces of it. What happened?" She's like, "Oh, I ran over it like 12 times and did a burnout on it." And I'm like, "Okay, well, it's done. I mean, it's toast. So you're safe now." But yeah, rattlesnake bites are always, it's always a topic for us because, I was just down in Mexico last year for mule deer, and that's like snake heaven down there too.
Yeah. No, and I just thought that's pertinent because, like I said, when I'm elk hunting, I don't worry about. There is no need to worry about snakes, but when I'm going to be out in the prairie,
yes,
if it's warm out, they're gonna be around somewhere,
And it's tough, Rick, because what I usually say is when we're hiking our property, particularly June, July, when they're more mobile, that mating season, they're moving up here. It's like I always tell the kids as we're hiking, we want to make a lot of noise, because rattlesnakes try to get away from you. Copperheads won't. Copperheads are going to come right at you, but I see far more rattlesnakes in our territory than copperheads, but you want to make noise, let them know that you're there, always be listening. That video I put up the other day, that was a rattlesnake that's right on the front bank, of our place here. I mean, that was really? A snake. Yeah, that's a snake that's, that's a snake that was just right here by our place. And they've been at my front door and they've been at the garage door. And last week I took the kids out to go down to the chicken coop and, close them up for the night, and a garage door opens and here's a big snake laid out right along the concrete of the garage door. It was just a big black snake. But when you have rattlesnakes around, it's always caution.
Yeah. I lived in Australia. I lived in Australia for a year, and the first time I got over there, and I did, the bathroom's not the loo, so I had to go to the loo, which my room was kind of outside, and the bathroom, the toilet was across the way from me, and I didn't know, and they had I'm hearing tiger snakes and I'm hearing all this other stuff, and this is another funny thing because I didn't realize they rolled up the hose, which was actually brown, the garden hose, and I walked out, and then you're half awake, and I sounded like a little girl, we'll just say that.
I've never been listen, I've never been to Australia. I don't know that I want to, because it's like, I mean, they have some wild creatures down there from what I see. I mean, they have spiders that'll drag you off in the middle of the night. I mean, don't they have spiders that are like this big? It's ridiculous.
They're big.
Yeah.
So
no thanks.
But I mean, yeah. So this,
because I want to keep on, I hope we can keep on collaborating here. I don't want to keep you all night. I know it's late there, but you've disappointed me. I'm going to tell you, you've disappointed me in two ways, because first of all, don't take the arrow out. Then my John Wayne, you break the arrow off, pull it out, brand it, you're done. You don't even need anything done. And then
don't do it.
Then the rattlesnake bite, you don't cut it open and suck out the blood and spit it out, pour a little whiskey on it, and you're done too.
Yeah, jeez, sorry to disappoint you, my friend.
I thought all these Westerns were real.
Yeah. You're going to have this big moment of just ripping this arrow out of your chest and be like, let's go. We're going to keep hunting. No, you die.
Put the arrow in your mouth then, so they can brand it and cauterize it.
No, I always laugh when I see that on movies and stuff, right? One of my favorite series was Lonesome Dove. You know, you remember that series? I love that series.
Oh, I love it.
You know, where Gus is along the creek bed and he's got that arrow run through his thigh and he's just like, he bites down, pulls it out, and different time then, but you know, I think we've learned a lot since, you know, the 1800s of how to manage foreign bodies. And you just kind of have to envision that foreign body could be the thing that's pushing up against that artery and literally and saving your life so you don't bleed out. So I'd never recommend, you know, pulling that. Never.
No, I agree with you. And I've seen that too.
With that being said, Rick, you know, and this is where understanding anatomy and kind of where major vessels lie in the body. You know, certainly if you catch one, you know, through the top part of your bicep here or through your tricep back here, John Wayne it, man. I mean, do it, be that cool guy and just rip it out. And, you know, you don't have any major arteries back here. So,
well, if I get an arrow or anything in there, they better hope that I don't pull it out, because I'll be shooting back.
Yeah. Well, now you have my cell phone number. You can just call and put me on FaceTime and be like, hey, what should I pull this one or not?
Yeah. I do have, now that we talked about that, I have one, like, what is worse, a gunshot wound or like you got shot with a broadhead? Have you seen both?
Oh yeah. Yep. I've seen both. I've seen, I think every projectile foreign body that mankind has to offer and want to inflict harm on other people. So way different dynamics in terms of a broadhead and in terms of a rifle, right? And, you know, with rifle injuries, it's that, you know, the ballistics of that and the shock wave that occurs, you know, with a rifle, it's doing a lot more. It does it's doing that damage internally, right? Now, a broadhead, as you know, in hunting, you know, you get that pass through and the pass throughs are, I think, less damaging than one that sticks, because you have that broadhead in there that's just bouncing around as, you know, that elk or muley's running off and just slicing and dicing internally. So, and that's the other thing, if you catch an arrow, say you get an arrow into the chest and you've got a good section of it sticking out, that's where stabilize that in place, you know, so that isn't bouncing around and that broadhead isn't in your chest, kind of slicing and dicing and ripping through some arteries if it already hasn't. Now, the difference with a rifle shot is, you know, that area, that trajectory through your chest is much bigger than just the, you know, inch and a half of a broadhead, depending on what you're using, fixed or mechanical, right? So using if it's a mechanical blade, I mean, that could be coming through, you know, inch and a half, inch 3/4, you know, creating that type of wound. You know, a 223, a 30-06 may be coming through, and that may be, you know, 3, 4, 5 inches of a path, you know, destruction through your chest, right? And the same thing through your leg. You know, an arrow, we do know arrows can, you know, break bones. You know, certainly capable of doing that. Rifle most certainly will. You know, not just a rifle, but a handgun too. So you're not just dealing with, you know, the soft tissue, the muscle, the vessel, but you're also dealing with bone injury there too with a rifle or handgun.
Yeah, I mean, you can probably fix the arrow. I mean, if in the right situations, you
Yeah.
could probably, because it's a slice. I mean, it's a cut. It isn't
Yeah. Yeah.
like a explosion. More or less, that's what I would say. I'm not saying a
Yeah.
bullet.
And, the challenging thing with, rifles, any gun, handgun, rifle, whatever it be, when you look at that externally, when you look at that person, you're going to see, where you're going to see that hole, that puncture wound, right? And, what we always say is the entry is always smaller than the exit, right? And we're cautious with that and how we document that, because gets into some legal stuff for us in medicine. But traditionally, what you do see is the entry is a smaller wound than the exit. So, but if it doesn't pass through, externally, you're looking at this thing and you've got a hole that's maybe the size of a, small pencil or a pen, right? And you think like, how bad could that be? I had this young man once that was shot right here, right on it, right at his humeral head, right at the top of his humerus bone here, and he just had that puncture right there, and there was nothing else. And as I have him in the trauma bay, and getting IVs in, and I'm getting ready to shoot an X-ray, and I pull the X-ray boom over top of him to shoot the X-ray, and he looks at me and he goes, "Hey, doc." And I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Don't let me die." And that's the one thing that you hear as an ER doctor that you never want to hear, because when somebody says, "Don't let me die," they're dying. And by the time I got that and came around with it, he flatlined. And what had happened was that, so this is a great example of arrow versus rifle or handgun, what causes more damage. That round caught him in the shoulder. It deflected and came right down through his chest.
Oh my gosh.
So when I opened his chest up, he had a big laceration in the left ventricle of his heart with a big clot that had let go. So that's a race against time to get that sewn up quick and get enough blood volume back in him and get his heart restarted. And unfortunately, that's a very, very difficult case. Just wasn't able to do it. So, that's one case that I always think about and reference whenever I'm asked this question, arrow versus, projectile from a handgun or a rifle.
That was, I just was thinking about
because
that.
You don't know where they go. You don't, these things hit bone and they can go anywhere in the body. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a teenager that his buddy thought the gun was unloaded and they were playing around with it, put the pistol in his mouth and pulled the trigger, and you don't know where that goes. Your thought is like an arrow, you have that vector. Okay. The end of it's here. The other end of it's here. This is where it went through. With a rifle or handgun, that hits anything and it can just ricochet and go around in your body.
Yep. Well, let's talk about something different before we get off here than that.
Sorry.
So, no, but,
apologies. When you get into
you're good.
When you get into my shop talk, you get deep into it. And
no, and it's very interesting. I
oftentimes forget most people aren't exposed to this stuff, so it can be a little shocking. So I apologize.
Well, I've been around enough people to hear these kind of things too, but it's like, but I thought, so if you had, here's the deal. Because it's funny, what would you take as a pain reliever if you needed something on a hunt or something like that? Because you're not going to, I mean, I don't know what you would take there, or what's the most important, what I say, medicine or prescription or whatever you need. What would you take? Say I'm going to Alaska for a 2-week hunt and something, you have a bad headache or other things happen. What would you take? So
I'll say, when you say, what's the most important medicine we should take on a hunt? And my answer for that will always be epinephrine, an EpiPen. That doesn't help with your headache. But in terms of life-saving medications you should have with you, that's the one medication that if you, and I actually just did a post about this my daughter did it actually. My daughter
Yeah,
posted,
she did. I saw
yeah,
that.
she wanted to post on this one. My her younger sister, one of the twins. So I have twins. I have an 18-year-old and I have 11-year-old twins, soon to be 12, a boy and girl twin. And the younger daughter, she's gone into anaphylaxis 3 times. And, I nearly intubated her, at 3:00 in the morning one night because she was in anaphylactic shock. And, at that point, it's like we have EpiPens with us. Epinephrine, when you're out remote, because you don't know, especially if you're going into a foreign area, you don't know what or if you're allergic to anything within that area, right? So most people that are allergic to bee stings, they're well versed in this. They know that they carry them everywhere. They've experienced it. They know how to administer it. So epinephrine is going to be the life-saving medication. Now, the convenience medications and what can keep you out there longer, I'll say the second most important would be antibiotics. Because if you have that cut, if you get a burn or a scrape or you get a puncture wound, being able to take those antibiotics to get you through the next few days to get out, get to an emergency department or hospital, can save your life, possibly save an extremity, right? When we talk about pains, aches, pains, headaches, stuff like that, we usually look to Tylenol, acetaminophen, or ibuprofen, which is Advil, right? Common name or brand name. So those are the 2 for headaches. Now, when we talk about, Tylenol versus ibuprofen, we look at how they're processed in our body and which one you should take. So Tylenol is mainly processed through our liver. So if you have any liver problems, or, if you're a heavy drinker, or you're in camp and you're spending the week drinking, you're going to be taxing your liver way more by taking a bunch of Tylenol, especially if, you get out west, you get to elevation, you get that elevation sickness, you have that headache for 3-4 days, it's, man, what do I take? And you want to make sure you're hydrating, hydrate up for that elevation before you get there and make sure you stay hydrated. And, it's going to be Tylenol or ibuprofen. Ibuprofen's processed more through the kidneys. So if you have an underlying history of kidney disease or, chronic renal failure, if, you're a bad diabetic, that Advil can be very taxing on your kidneys then. So based on your medical history is, that's what we'd recommend. And I always get guys asking me, hey, I've got some old oxycodone or hydrocodone, from, an old surgery or procedure. And, can I take that? And the answer, if you've taken it in the past and it's been okay, who am I to say that you can't take it if you're familiar with it? But I don't recommend ever that anybody take something like that in a remote area or any area, in fact, if, it's not yours and, you've not taken it. I mean, those medications, opioids, that suppress your breathing, get you hypoxic, and you're going to be dealing with a very different, life-threatening issue then. So, because I've seen other guys in camp, like, somebody brings them along because they had a surgery and another guy's complaining of a headache. And he's like, oh, hey, man, this will take your headache right away. And it's like, they don't even know the dosage and they're naive. And, that guy that had it for a surgery may have gotten a dose prescribed to him, based off of past experience or that he's more tolerant of it. So it may be a higher dose than what you can handle. So you end up taking that one pill and, it could, you could become obtunded pretty quick, especially if you turn in for the night, go to sleep and your respirations dip and you start getting hypoxic, low oxygen levels. So I don't ever recommend doing that.
All right. Well, I have 2 questions. The one is when we were talking about the epinephrine, and I told you this morning when I talked to you, I had a guy, I was on a delivery, and this is a few years ago, well, about actually 5-6 years ago, but he gave himself epinephrine, said he was going to the hospital, and then he turned around and came back and said, you need to take me to the hospital and then he went into shock. I don't know if it's shock or what it is, but
Yeah.
you know, he peed his pants. I'm driving him over. You know what I mean? He's going, and I'm
No,
going.
he's in
In that
shock.
situation, in that situation, I don't know. You're not bleeding.
Yeah.
You don't have a broken bone, or you know, that's one of the first times like I really kind of I mean, we were about 15 miles from the hospital, and I made it there pretty damn quick.
Yeah.
But when he's sitting beside me doing that, what do I do? Just keep on flying to the hospital, and we made it, and they fixed him. You know, they got him in. But for me personally, I'm going. I don't want him. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
You know, because he got stung by a bee or whatever, and I'm going. I can't see what's wrong.
Yeah.
You feel helpless.
You do feel helpless in those situations, and they're challenging. And so epinephrine, going back to the same thing I said about tourniquets, one is none. You carry two.
Yeah.
Epi's the same way. One is none. They sell these things in a 2-pack for a reason. Administer that epi. And my daughter did a great video on this the other day, and I love how and this was all her. I didn't prompt her. She studied this on her own because that's what I encourage the kids to do. I'm there to answer their questions, but I want them to study to learn on their own so they know how to handle these things. So we carry 2-packs. Now they're not cheap, so you don't have to go with the EpiPen brand. You can go with the generic brand that saves you a lot of money. And then, get online and, go on GoodRx and look for the coupons and stuff, because these can be $700-800 for a 2-pack that you can end up getting it down to about $40 if you go on one of these, the GoodRx things online and stuff. Right.
Yep.
And that's, if you have a good relationship with your primary care doctor and you're going away, you can ask for that because they're by prescription. So you can ask for that prescription for the generic brand. That's going to be a lot cheaper for you, but always carry 2. So in that situation, he administered epi, and where we want to give epi is in the lateral thigh, right? You don't want to do it straight down in the leg. You could hit major vessel. You don't want to do it in the neck, and don't go Pulp Fiction style and jam it in somebody's chest. So, okay, don't do that. But yep, administer it in the lateral thigh. You can go right through the clothing and know which side is the plunger, right? So what did my daughter say the other day? Green to the ground, blue to the sky, into the lateral thigh, right? And I like the way she did that because that's easy to remember then, right? Blue to the sky, into the lateral thigh. Most of these will have a blue cap on them. That's the plunger side. I have had colleagues actually administer EpiPens straight into their thumb because they thought that was the plunger side. And not that it does any real harm. It just makes your thumb ache because it cuts, it constricts the blood vessels then.
Yeah.
So what you want to do, you give that, and in 5 to 10 minutes, if you're not seeing symptom relief, or within that 10 minutes, you're starting to see escalation of symptoms, give a second dose, right? You just want to give the second dose. And it's 911, because you can be flying down the road. That ambulance, those EMS services could be making their way to you and do a nice handoff there. But if you're in the middle of nowhere with no EMS services, it's EpiPen. And then it turns into airway support, CPR. And if you get somebody in true anaphylactic reaction and they start getting tongue, mouth, back of their throat swelling, you get into some very advanced techniques then to save their life. And that is emergency, crikes, where you make a hole in their neck to, put a tube in there. But we don't want to, get anybody to that level yet. So.
Yeah, no, that was the only one that really hit me. Cause like I said, with a blood, I figured now that I'm learning more, I'm will be better, but I figured at least I can try to stop the blood. I can try to put some kind of a splint on if in those situations. But in that situation, I was going, I governed out his pickup. I can tell you that we were flying down the road because I didn't know. But when I get to the last question, if you listen to Dana's, then you might know, but I'm going to let you go, get some sleep, because I know it's late there in Pennsylvania, but and I really, really, really want to thank you. I'll thank you again, because this has been educational as well as fun. And I really enjoy this, and I hope that, like I said, Don't Die Rusty's about getting in the woods or getting in wherever and not about wearing out, not rusting out, and just being the best you. So this will help people, maybe, I hope, and then we'll have hopefully another conversation, and then they don't have to be afraid about being out in the woods, or about being hurt, or they might know stuff. But the last question we ask is, what's the good life to Mike?
The good life to me. Good life to me is my wife and kids and experiences with them. We're very much into being in the moment and experiences, and not so much the materialistic things. I mean, that's honestly the good life. And at this point in my life, I'm 47. Certainly, not old, but I feel that I've aged very rapidly over the last 20 years in the work that I do. And, I unfortunately, have a front, and center seat to, witness and being part of a lot of tragedy over those years. And the good life is just the time that you have, and using that time the best that you can, and not missing out on the little things that you may think that's insignificant. There's a lot of significant things with your kids that you think as an adult's insignificant, but they think it's the biggest deal in the world. And, I'd say that I've made a focused effort to realize that and do more of that, and, make sure that it's not just all about work and the job, and that it's a healthier balance for them to make sure that they get to experience all the great things.
Yeah, because Randy Newberg has said it. You can always make money, but you can now always have your health. So go on those adventures, do stuff.
Yeah.
Make those memories. That's like what I say with Don't Die Rusty too, is make those memories. Do those things that you dreamed of doing and make them a reality. And I've always said there's no rewind in life. So if you don't do it now, you aren't gonna, like with your kids. If you don't make memories with your kids, then when they get older, you're not making many memories with them then too. Because
make them now. Make them now. I mean, I just, I often reflect on a lot of the people that I've helped, and I've, tried to help, and unfortunately haven't been successful. And I can promise you that not one woke up that morning thinking that this is the last. Right. And, it's like, don't have regret, and don't live in the past, and don't think about what I should have done or what I could have done. Just do it. Because that day comes for all of us. It's just, at what point does it come? There is no tomorrow. You can't live life that way. I mean, you certainly have to be reserved, and you have to be responsible, but you can't always look to tomorrow as if it's a guarantee, because, I've been witness to hundreds and, probably over 1,000 people that, that tomorrow doesn't come. So that's the good life to me, is just seeing my kids thrive, seeing my kids, what my wife and I create, and supporting them, and seeing them, with their passions. That's what I love. And just help. I mean, I just love helping people, to be honest. I mean, that's what feels good to me at the end of the day, is that I've helped someone and they're better because of it, or they're still here because of it. Most importantly, they're still here, and they can go and have those experiences with their kids and their family. And I think that's going back to our beginning. I think that was my calling in life, and why things happened the way they did to me. And at the time I didn't understand it, and, severely depressed that I couldn't play a game. And I look back now and I think, a stupid game. And I was really hurt over that I couldn't do it anymore, but I think it turned out pretty good. So,
well, you are influencing people more. I mean, sometimes we wonder if you're doing, like I wonder, and then I get a text, or I get a message, or I get this from an episode I've done. People say that. And with you putting with PrepEm, my gosh, all the information you're putting out there for people to see and all the good stuff, like I said, you have inspired me to want to come and whenever I can find a class or get you out here or whatever here, maybe invite you hunting and then I could go learn something.
Let's do a Don't Die Rusty class. I think what you like, Rick, I love what you're doing, and it really just marries very well with what we do. And, what I've done for 20 years. I mean, I love it. I absolutely love it. Let's do a Don't Die Rusty class and get people from out there and let's just create a bunch of assets in the outdoor community.
Well, let's do that. That'd be awesome. And here's what the deal is. I try to be the best me every day, and you made me better today. I'm telling you that right now. I've learned so much from you, and that is what's good.
Well, I appreciate that. That means a lot. It like you said, you end your day and you wonder, am I doing any good? Did I make an impact? And sometimes we need to tell one another that. And I can tell you, since I've started following you, you've started my days off on a much more positive note, and it really gives you something to look forward to. So I think everybody should be following you. I think your messages are important, and they're certainly important within the community, and really to recenter us into how we should be looking at what we do on a daily basis and what life is. So I thank you too, because you're having an impact on me, and it's uplifting, and there's a lot of days that I need to be uplifted. So it's very much appreciated.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate you, and I appreciate you being on the episode. So
you bet.
Until next time.
Yeah. So anytime you want, more than happy to.
All right. Well, don't die, Rusty Nation. As always, keep chasing your dreams, being the best you, and don't die rusty.